are so well conditioned to stay within those bounds that you can't conceptualize leaving to a parallel system that may work better for you. I don't think the education system, the institutional corporate America system, or the monetary system based on debt benefits from anyone understanding Austrian economics. You and I are on the lifeboat already with a bottle of rosé, and the people on the Titanic are looking at us and saying, look at those idiots, they fell off the ship. And what I've learned in dealing with families processing grief and loss is that at the end, the things that matter most is not money or your career, it's how did you treat your family? But they're not selling them to guys like you or me, they're selling them to MicroStrategy, to BlackRock, and all these large institutions and money managers. And I think it's only a matter of time before that switch really hits people's brains and they start to understand, oh wow, this is all about to change and Bitcoin will take center stage. I've had a low time preference for Bitcoin, and given the landscape changes in the past year, my time preference has just gotten lower. I think the trajectory in the US has validated everything as a Bitcoiner I believed in for the previous few years. And I see political actors and large institutions saying what Bitcoiners have been saying for, OG Bitcoiners for a decade, but I mean, me and newer Bitcoiners for since 2020 and 2021 cycle, the debt is unsustainable. We're looking at in the face of a huge debt crisis. How can we sustain this? This is an untenable situation. We have to do something about this. And under the surface, Trump signs an executive order for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The talk of stable coins and integration of stable coins and crypto more broadly, including Bitcoin, being integrated and financialized in the US, happening under the surface as that discussion of the untenable debt and looming monetary crisis kind of overhangs those conversations. So you watch what they say, you listen to what they say, and then watch what they do. So they're discussing huge debt issues, problems of the global monetary system, and then their actions are rolling out Bitcoin strategic reserve, discussing Bitcoin as a solution to debt issues, introducing stablecoin legislation in the US. All of those things signal to me that this is not stopping and is actually accelerating. They don't talk about it with tremendous excitement like Bitcoiners do, because I think they have to be a bit more measured as, institutional voices or political actors. But the direction is the same. And it seems to me that the speed at which they're trying to make these changes is accelerating. So, I mean, and that's great to see as a Bitcoiner. I think my only concern is the amount of normal people that still have poor views of Bitcoin because of, bad actors like Sam Bankman-Fried and the Celsius debacle with Alex Mashinsky. I think that there's a lot of confusion about the difference between Bitcoin and crypto still, because there hasn't been a big entrance from retail in the last year. The big entries have been, OGs selling parts of their stack that they bought from, $1 to $700, but they're not selling them to guys like you or me. They're selling them to MicroStrategy, to BlackRock, and all these large institutions and money managers that see this asset are trying to take those coins from strong long-term holders into institutions and not retail. And that tells me that, there's probably still a lot of upside left to this market still, because we haven't had any mania. We got to $112,000 here in the US a couple of weeks ago, and not many of my friends knew or cared or were interested at all. And that signaled to me that this is, kind of the least exciting all-time high that I've seen. I mean, I was excited. I'm sure you were excited. But for the most part, it's still pretty low priority for most people. And I couldn't believe it, because I've been talking to them about it for a year and a half, getting them comfortable with the idea and the conversation. And then the price action kind of proves me right, but still no interest to click the button and put it in the portfolio.
That is super interesting. And also, maybe I think maybe to take a step back, because maybe some people don't know you, and I think you have a really interesting background also with the funeral home and all the stories around that. Then we can maybe also get into this discussion of time preference.
Yeah.
So maybe give the people some background, who you are and what you're doing with especially with the funeral, because I think we can also have an interesting discussion with like time preference and seeing the death.
Yeah, so my name's Will. I am a licensed funeral director in California. My family owned a large funeral home and crematory in Southern California for almost 50 years. And we sold that funeral home at the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. And at that time, I had a lot of time on my hands and a little bit of money from the sale of the business. And I had been scammed on Celsius and lost Bitcoin on Celsius while working at the funeral home the year before. And I had a bit of money in my pocket, and I said to myself, okay, I need to figure out how to invest this money. I've just spent 10 years of my life working extremely hard to help build my family's business and help families through grief and loss. And I asked myself the question, how can I store that time and energy most effectively so that I feel in the future that I've gotten the most out of the time and energy that I've already spent. So I want that time and energy to represent more for myself in the future rather than less, because I can never get that time back. But I want to find the mechanism to preserve and grow it the most for the future. Because I don't, if that money had been robbed of me through loss of purchasing power, I would feel that time that I'd already spent was being taken from me as if I had not done it. And that led me to a research expedition of crypto more broadly, and then specifically Bitcoin, as I kind of eliminated crypto from the assets that actually would do what my goal was. So I went on a big tear for Bitcoin content, crypto content, and all those sorts of things, and finally really focused the vast majority of my time on reading about Bitcoin, listening to podcasts like yours on Bitcoin, and understanding what its purpose is now and in the future. So I ended up putting a lot of that money from the sale of the business into Bitcoin, and found it as the best savings tool for me, for my time and energy that I could. And that's kind of been my journey since the sale. And I did consulting for funeral homes, new cremation businesses wanting to launch, go-to-market strategies. And now I work for one of my clients who I'll probably end up getting a full-time job with in the next month or two, is after.com. They're an online-based cremation service, and I help open their business in new states within the US. So my job is to now travel to different markets in the US and look up the laws that are required to open a funeral establishment and find a piece of real estate that fits the laws, get the licensing so that we can open a funeral home there. So that's what I do now. And it's a fun job for me. It's not a fun job for, I imagine, 99 out of 100 people. But for me, I'm very good at it, and it's right in my skill set. And I enjoy it. And it's funny, Robert, because you hear Bitcoiners have like kind of a bit life crisis. Like they've kind of accumulated, a stack, and then price kind of runs away from them a bit. And then you have this crisis where you say to yourself, I'm probably not going to earn exponentially more money at my job. Like I'll earn steadily more, but not exponentially more. So you're looking at your stack and you realize that it's probably not going to change materially over the next, 5 years or so, just because price appreciation has kind of hit some sort of escape velocity. Accumulating Bitcoin at, 30 to 50,000 is a lot better than 105 to 110,000, right? Your dollars go half as far in accumulation at that stage. So I feel like my job now is kind of like almost like semi-retirement. Like I'm very comfortable with my stack. I'll always accumulate more in small portions, but now this job has kind of been reframed to me as fun. Like I don't have to worry about, raise negotiations or, vying for equity in the company. I can just do my job, be happy with it, because I've saved in an asset that I know will preserve my time and energy well into the future. So I don't have to worry on a day-to-day basis, how am I going to figure out how to manage my money, earn twice as much money, or, any type of speculative investment to save me from, what's coming in the future. It's like I've done that work already. And now I can kind of take pride in my work and handle it with, more clarity and way more calmness, because I've made the decision earlier to save my time and energy in something that I know is going to work for me. So I work at this job for myself in spirit, and I give it all I have with no worry, because Bitcoin is working for me.
That's beautiful. And it's a real, I mean, you're in a luxury situation if you're in this situation, but I've met some Bitcoiners that have been in Bitcoin for a longer period of time, and they've told me like, oh, I have X amount of Bitcoin. I have that earning capacity. I really have to invest aggressively in like making a company work or anything like that to out earn. So it actually makes a difference on my stack. At the same time, Bitcoin is growing exponentially faster. So Bitcoin as the hurdle rate is really hard to go after. And your earning capacity is kind of lagging behind if you're not growing really fast. Or maybe you are in a special situation where if Bitcoin grows, your business also grows, which, for example, with my podcast, with my mini small podcast business, I see if the price is really rising, like interest is getting strong, and like the podcast is getting strong, and like sponsors have more money and all those things. So like that's interesting. But outside of a special, outside of like being in the Bitcoin industry, you're probably not out earning Bitcoin.
Yeah. Almost impossible.
Almost impossible. I mean, you can, but it's like very hard, and you have to be very successful either in your career or in a business. And this midlife crisis, you call it. I never heard that. I love the term midlife crisis.
Yeah.
That's really, really interesting. And I want to get to like retiring on Bitcoin and how do you see that? Yeah. But maybe before that, how has being someone in a funeral home, working there, owning that, doing that, operating that, impacted your time preference completely outside of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think working in a funeral home is one of the best industries to kind of understand the conceptual big picture Bitcoin ethos of low time preference. A lot of Bitcoiners, in my experience, are very humble people who want to add more value to the world than they take from it. And as a fundamental concept for life, that is a good strategy. You know, give more than you take, earn more than you spend, as a life philosophy. In my work at the funeral home, I talk to mostly people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, because those are the people who are near the end of their life. And those people have a tremendous amount of wisdom if you engage in those conversations about life with them. And what I've learned in dealing with grief and loss and families processing grief and loss is that at the end, the things that matter most is not money or your career. It's how did you treat your family? How did you nurture the most important relationships in your life? How did you find healthy balance between work and play, and make sure that you actually do save time for play with those that you care about, your family, your children, your grandchildren? Because at the end of your life, when you're looking back on all the time spent, you know, because everyone only gets a finite number of hours on this earth. The only thing that's other than Bitcoin that's finite on this planet is your life. We all are going to die at some day, right? So our time is finite. There's a special realization that after I have heard, you know, hundreds of these, you know, points of wisdom, that life is meant to be lived. It is not a constant search for financial gain and accumulation of wealth, singularly. And I think a lot of people now, because they're forced to in a debt-based monetary system based on fiat, they are forced to concentrate on the accumulation of wealth, because if they don't, then they will get inflated out of existence. So I understand why it's happening. And I also know that that's not how human beings should have to operate. And in a, you know, on a Bitcoin standard in the future, I hope that people can explore more creative, artistic, or passionate endeavors for their career and life, rather than, you know, being stuck at a job that they don't like just to make ends meet and make bill payments, right? And I think now we're seeing more and more than ever that is what families are forced into. You have more dual working households. You know, both parents have to work because everything's so expensive. It's no longer an option in the state of the world. And when I see how these people in their 70s and 80s and 90s got to live, they could afford a home and food on the table, new clothes for school every year for the children, and 1 or 2 vacations a year on one income. Now it's 2 incomes and you can barely afford them, or you might have to give up 1 vacation, and you have to kind of sacrifice that for other necessary needs. So the baby boomers, the silent generation, have enjoyed an existence that we don't get to enjoy anymore. But understanding that those relationships still matter and we should still be concentrating on those, how do you solve for that problem so that your family doesn't have those issues? And to me, there's no better asset to store your time and energy for your benefit and your family's benefit in 10 and 20 years than Bitcoin. So I want to, when I'm 55, in a little over 20 years, I want my life to be cheaper in fiat terms. And Bitcoin's the only way that I see doing that, and the best way I see doing that. And that will give me and my family the flexibility and optionality and freedom to do more of what we want, what we like, than what we think that we have to do. Right? I in my profession, I see a lot of noble people working a job for 40 years that they didn't like just to accumulate the wealth so that they could retire. And I think Bitcoin flips that entire thing on its head, especially if you see it early, which if you've, started a podcast business in this space, you see it and I see it too. And I think it's now about, spreading this message to more people so that more people get it and more people have that flexibility, optionality, and freedom in the future.
Yeah, and I think most people, even if you watch this podcast and you're still not into Bitcoin, which probably like 2% of the viewers are, because why are you watching this podcast then? But like, there's always some new people, some small percentage of new people in. So you everyone listening and watching this, like they see it, they saw it, or at least they have an intuition of like, hey, there's something going on in the world. And this can lead to, number graph technology, like we always know, you can retire early on that. But the implications of that is so fundamental, because all of a sudden you get your life back. So sometimes we make the mistake of like dismissing number graph technology of like, you're just in it for the money. And like, yeah, like Bitcoin is money, so I'm in it for the money. But I'm in it for the implications, because if I can retire my family on Bitcoin, means I can be full-time there for my family. I can be full-time there for my wife, for my kids. That's a whole game changer. So this retiring on Bitcoin is more important, I think, than we give it credit to. And rightfully so, a lot of people are interested in that topic. So how do you look at retiring on Bitcoin and how you approach that? I mean, the best way of retiring is probably like earning something that you really love, like working in something that you really love. But not all people have that luxury.
Right. I think in the US, I think we need to redefine retirement, in my opinion. I think this life cycle of born, then in the school system for 22 years, then in the workforce for 40 to 45 years, and then a short 10-year retirement where you leave your desk and don't do anything, wake up when you want, and sit around and watch TV and watch the news and watch the world go by I don't think that's my definition of retirement. My definition of retirement is not to stop working, but have the freedom to work on only the things that you care about and love, that give you meaning in life. So I would love, or maybe the optionality not to need the job rather than have to have the job, and being financially secure enough that you have that flexibility. So I think about it, for me personally, against the programmed monetary policy of Bitcoin. So by 2035, 99% of all Bitcoin will be mine. And then we have, theoretically, an infinite time horizon where 99+% will be in circulation. So essentially reaching that fixed supply over the next however many centuries, right? So my personal choice is to take all discretionary fiat from my work and put it into Bitcoin with low time preference and accumulate monthly until probably 2030 or 2032. And then that will be my stacking phase will basically be run from 2021, 2022 to 2030. So I am completely focused with blinders on making sure that all of my discretionary income goes into Bitcoin, and thinking about the flexibility I have in 2030 or 2032. And not thinking about it too much until then, because I like what I do. I enjoy the people I work with. I feel good about the value I'm giving to this company and to society through my work in this company. It aligns with my values. So I don't need to really worry about anything else. And I'm singularly focused on that Bitcoin accumulation for that time frame. And I'll pick my head up and reassess my options at the end of that time frame. And I'll be in a better position then than I am today. And I feel very comfortable in that. So what will I do after 2030 or 2032? I don't know. I hope actually something in Bitcoin, maybe a payments app, maybe custody solutions. I don't know. And right now I don't particularly have to know. And I feel very comfortable not knowing because I like the work that I'm doing. Or maybe I'm in a position where I, have a family and I want that family to live a different lifestyle than I'm living now, or even that I grew up with. I grew up in the capital of the US, Washington, D.C. I was a city kid. I kind of like the idea of getting, 10 or 20 acres, maybe in Tennessee or Texas or Wyoming, and, making that my own oasis of self-sufficiency. Chickens, maybe an herb garden, growing some vegetables, building ponds, and just kind of building my own little paradise on Earth, and getting a little job in town. One of my friends, his dad is retired and lives in Montana. He's done very well for himself. And to stay busy, he works at the local hardware store fixing grills. And he's happy. He makes a very good living off of his retirement pension and doesn't need the money, but he enjoys fixing grills and having conversations with the guys that bring their broken grills in. And, he loves to grill meat and eat meat and have these conversations and add that value to the community in his small way, and it's no pressure. Maybe something like that. But I don't know what I'll do, but I know that I want the flexibility to decide for myself.
It's also an amazing, I think this is actually something that I've never talked about, just came to know, just thought about it, because it's like when you have Bitcoin and you are stacking consistently and your purchasing power, and with that your life energy power goes up, you all of a sudden have leverage. So in your example, who was, like, your granddad, was it, or like?
Yeah, my grandfather founded the company. Yeah.
Oh yeah, your grandfather that works now for the store, for the grills. He can at any time say, "Oh, like, goodbye. Like, I don't like it anymore," or like, you treat me badly. I don't want it anymore." It probably doesn't happen because it's like a good environment and stuff like that. But with Bitcoin and with having this retirement plan, you can still work if you enjoy it and you have leverage. I feel like, oh, like, I really don't want that. So like, either this changes or I just go because I can afford to go. And having this exit option, having the flexibility of saying, oh, I don't want that anymore, I just go, just as an option. Not even as saying like you have to do it or you should do it. Because, mostly you should work something because you will probably be depressed after like a year of laying on the beach. So you should do something. So maybe stick with what you're already good at, but having that option gives you leverage. And we know in business it's all about leverage. Who sits on the highest stick, and you being able to walk away and saying no is fantastic. And Bitcoin gives you that freedom and this opportunity.
I think about that often, Robin. So that's a mentality that you understand implicitly, right? And then I compare that to a lot of my friends in the corporate world who have the mindset of, I have to stay in this job. This job pays me really well. In 10 years, this is what I will be earning. This is what my savings will be. This is what my investments will be. I cannot stop my work at this corporate employer because the benefits are so high, and I can only realize them by staying where I am. Right? And they are delaying their optionality because of the indoctrination from school, and then majoring in business in college. It puts you in the matrix, so to speak, so that you are so well conditioned to stay within those bounds that you can't conceptualize leaving to a parallel system that may work better for you. And we have just exited that world and exist in the parallel system. And our lives are proof that it is beneficial to the individual, to the family, to the worker, to the institution, to the company. Right? And I think it's a lot of fear that keeps people from making that decision to allocate 1 to even 5% of their portfolio to Bitcoin. Because even that small percentage, I think, will make such a drastic difference to someone's retirement ability in the next 10 years. And because there's been so much FUD on Bitcoin, I think it's still clouding that decision, and all of the forces that act on them in their corporate job keep them away from taking the Bitcoin option and exit, and only ensures that they are forced to stay in a job that they may or may not like for longer. You have to have you have to do the work to understand Bitcoin, and that takes time and that takes diligence and a tremendous amount of effort, right? But I think Michael Saylor said it best, right? As he tends to. You spend 80,000 hours of your life working. You should probably spend 100 hours figuring out how to keep it. And that's I think the shift that needs to happen in America at, for the corporate worker, but also the people that are struggling to make ends meet. It's for everybody. It's to give that optionality for everyone at whatever scale that they can afford.
Yeah, it's super interesting when I talk with like friends sometimes and with family members, and I told them like, you have to study money and you have to study like where you invest your money, because they're not aware that not investing is a choice. Right. So if they are just putting everything in the euro or in dollar, in whatever the fiat currency is, this is an active choice they are willing to do, but they don't realize it's an active choice. Right. So when I tell them, oh, you have to study money, they're like, oh, why should I spend my time on researching about money? I have the euro, I just like save in that, or I have my ETF, I have my bank consultant. And that argument of Seyr is so amazing, because like saying, hey, you have 80,000 hours that you work for money, maybe spend some time, 100 hours, how to keep that money that you work for. Yeah. It's a no-brainer, but people don't see that. People are distracted by news. People are distracted by any sorts of confusion. And it's sad to see, honestly.
It is, especially among very intelligent people who have, and I would put myself in this class of people. I loved economics at an early age. My dad introduced me to economics and theories of economics as a young child. And I thought that I had an advantage with that type of education. And then I studied finance in university and thought that I was miles ahead of everybody else with this understanding and knowledge. And then I get to Bitcoin, and I understand that Keynesian economics is an indoctrination tool to keep this debt monetary system normalized and perpetuated when the natural order of economics is much more aligned with the Austrian school, which I had never heard of until Bitcoin. No professor, no teacher, no assignment ever explored the concepts of Austrian economics. And I don't think the education system, the institutional corporate America system, or the monetary system based on debt benefits from anyone understanding Austrian economics at all. It foils the entire program that they've set in motion, which I kind of see now busting at the seams. I see the debt-based system busting at the seams here in the US and globally. I've never seen more news or podcasts or asset managers or VC investors talk about the issue of the looming debt crisis. Only in the past, 12 months have I seen political actors and investors talk about how the debt that we have is unsustainable and something needs to be done. And at the same time, they're mentioning something that's usually never been mentioned. We have Bitcoin rising in the zeitgeist, people talking about Bitcoin, people talking about, this new savings technology. And I don't think that's an accident. I think they're trying to say to people, wow, we have a really big problem and we're not sure of how to fix it. And at the same time, here's this new monetary asset that's had a meteoric rise, and here are all the problems it solves. It's hard for me to I don't think a lot of people link those two or connect those two, but they're absolutely connected. And I think it's only a matter of time before that switch really hits people's brains and they start to understand, oh, wow, this is all about to change and Bitcoin will take center stage.
It's that pain of the fiat system getting so big to the point where you cannot no longer ignore it, and you will have to find a solution. And it's on us Bitcoin educators, but even it's on us, everyone that has Bitcoin, to be that educator, to be prepared to have a solution. If someone says in your family, like, oh, like inflation is eating me away, what can I do? I'm feeling so bad because of my financial situation. You should be the bastion. You should be the one that says, like, oh, I adopted Bitcoin because of that. And you should study it and learn about it. It might be an interesting solution for you.
Absolutely.
So more of like an educator, more of like a passive, like, here is Bitcoin. If you want to take it, take it. And I'm here to educate yourself. Because if you are on the Titanic and you see that we are going to the iceberg, don't you want to take your family with you? And this is actually something that a lot of people don't know. The Titanic, the first savings boats, the first boats that saved the people were going empty or half empty, because people were skeptical if it's even real. People were dancing. Like, it's crazy when you see the reports. People were dancing on deck and were playing music and playing games because they all felt like, like, why should I get off the boat just to get on the boat after they fixed it? So, like, it did not really, and it were on the Titanic. I mean, the captain itself said something like, not even God himself could sink the ship. Something there's some famous words around that. Yeah, it can. God can sink the ship, and God will sink this fiat ship. And the first boats are leaving. The lifeboats. Now I get the word lifeboats. The first lifeboats are leaving, and you are on it or not. And you better should be on it than not be on it.
I tell my close friend who is also a Bitcoiner, because we have a lot of the same friends, and we've been trying to introduce them softly to Bitcoin as an idea. And a lot of them don't get it and are happy with their very good returns the past 2 years in, the S&P. So they don't think that they have a need for it, right? And we say to each other all the time, like, I think that I wish we could save more of our friends. You and I are on the lifeboat already with a bottle of rosé, drinking rosé on the lifeboat, already saved. And the people on the Titanic are looking at us and saying, look at those idiots. They fell off the ship. They fell off the unsinkable ship. But we are on the lifeboat and watching the Titanic, 300 meters from the iceberg that they don't know that they're about to hit. And we're trying to get them on the lifeboat so that they can actually see the trajectory of the boat into the iceberg. And
it's crazy. People have to get it.
Yeah, you can't understand it for them. And it takes many, many touch points, in my experience, to get them. It takes a calm and cool approach to get them open to the idea, and then many, many touch points for understanding the idea. And then something has to click in them so that when they get off work, they tune into your podcast. They tune into Michael Saylor's latest speech at a conference, or, Jeff Booth or Lynn Alden or, and James Lavish or Larry Lepard, any of these, macro big picture experts or hard money asset experts, and actually listen to them without judgment and absorb the information, and a willingness to say, maybe my worldview is incorrect. Am I willing to have my worldview flipped on its head in search of truth? And you have to be open to that concept to understand what's happening and how Bitcoin's a solution.
The first time I ever made any money, I got myself from that money a watch. And ever since then, I collect timepieces to remember times where I achieved some milestone. That's why I got the Bitcoin 2025 edition when I went to my first ever American Bitcoin conference. So for me, the Bitcoin watches from Coin Vigilante represents the time that we are living in. For every person that wears a Bitcoin watch, I know they are representing sound money to the outside world. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. I know how big of a hurdle it can be to have self-custody, but it's so freaking important to make that first step. We have to make sure it's as easy and simple as possible. And that's exactly what BitBox did. BitBox created the simplest and the easiest hardware wallet to use to get into self-custody. So get yourself a BitBox down from the link in the description. And when you use code Robin, you even get a 5% discount. Most people realize that way too late. If you have Bitcoin, you have to have a self-custody hardware wallet. But what are you doing if that hardware wallet breaks? Yeah, you wrote your seed phrase on paper. What if that paper is just dissolving or water is spilled on top of it? Paper is very non-durable. So you have to have a fire resistant, water resistant, and impact proof method of securing your seed phrase so you can back up your keys. And to do that, you should use a solid titanium plate from Stampseed. Go to stampseed.com and use code Robin to get not 5 or 10, but 15% off your Stampseed. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They're also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I wanna read something to you. I think it's super interesting because I just double check the thing on ChatGPT with the Lifeboats, because I actually heard this from someone and never really verified myself, and it's actually true. And the 3 reasons why it happened was lack of urgency. Mm-hmm. So many passengers, as we already discussed, did not see that the ship was really in danger. So they did not believe it, even though they heard it. Then there was a big uncertainty around the crew. They did not have the training for that. So it's the first ship in that size that's saying obviously the procedures, the training was not in place back then. And then there was also a lot of social hierarchy where they tried to get to the first class passengers first, but they were not coming, and there were a lot of I would guess half of the reason was people didn't took it seriously, and half of the reason was just lack of procedure and getting to people and weird things like that. And then this resulted in the Lifeboat number 7, which was the first one to leave. It had the capacity of 65 people. And only 28 people left in this boat.
What a shame. What a shame.
And 70% of the people on the boat, I heard, I have to double check, 70% of people died. Of course, if the lifeboats leave half empty, more than half empty, of course, you will have a massive disaster. And I think so the only way a Titanic analogy and Bitcoin analogy with Titanic breaks down is, I think even the last person leaving the Titanic will benefit from Bitcoin.
Yes.
So there will be a lifeboat for everyone. Nobody has to drown. But you will have a lot of better life if you are getting in the early boats, and everyone can get in there. Like, even if you have like €2 on your bank account, like you can get in those €2 can be on a Lightning wallet.
Yeah.
And it's already better than on your bank account. So I'm just stunned. And the more I look in this Titanic comparison, the more I like it. It makes more and more sense for me. But it's really hard to believe that people don't see it. But then if you make the things with the Titanic, you're like, yeah, it's human psychology. People feel safe in the present if they're not seeing the danger directly. And inflation is a danger that they don't directly see, but they will see.
Yes.
That's a problem.
Yeah, and then I think they feel it now, and they know it's a problem now. But to your point, like the passengers who are uncertain. If I were on the Titanic, right, and someone from the crew or someone said, "Oh, I hear that we just hit something and we're in danger," I wouldn't want to believe it, because I like dancing with my girlfriend. I like that we're about to sit down for a nice lobster tail dinner. I'm not in. If I can force myself to believe that not to be true, then I have a great evening ahead of me, right? And then I don't want that disrupted, right? But the truth is, and reality is, no, you need to act right now. And just a small action, in this case, it's not life or death at this point, right? Just a small action will have outsized benefit to you in the future. On the Titanic, that action means life or death. But here, just opening your mind to it and then slowly entering into Bitcoin will still have tremendous benefit to someone who does that. But I understand, and this is what I encounter when talking to a lot of my friends is, well, my job is great. I can feed my family. I have a house and the mortgage rate is 2.5%. I don't need Bitcoin. Despite understanding the inflation problems, I don't need Bitcoin. And it's hard to get them over that, because, Bitcoin's available to anyone who recognizes that they need it. If you don't recognize that you need it, it's a speculative asset still. It's not on sure footing. It's volatile. I'm not looking for that. Right. So it's hard to get them to just take a step out of their normal life, which is going rather well, and say, well, you do need this thing. And I get that. So the status quo and their current state of things is fine enough. So to them, they don't need it and they don't put in the work. And I try over time, and sometimes it takes a year, sometimes more, to get them to, allocate maybe just a little bit, or, some of my friends still none at all. And I've been talking to them about it for 3 years. And that's a shame, to me. But I can't force them to click the buttons. So,
and even if you force them, it will not change anything, because they will sell in the first crash. So it's like, they will jump off the lifeboat, swim back to the Titanic, and sink with the Titanic. That's what. If you don't understand Bitcoin, you will do exactly that.
Exactly. And it's not. It doesn't come from a bad place. In a way, it comes from a faith in the existing system, right? People have faith in the existing system, and they don't to them, America is the best. It has been the best. It is the best, and it will always be the best because Americans always find a way. And I like to believe that. I do. However, it's because I now know way more than I did 3 years ago about the financial system, about the Fed, about money printing and central banking. I feel much more confident in my knowledge about the mechanisms of this financial machine. And after the veil has been lifted and I can finally see what's going on, there's no other option for me. And that's only on the other side of a tremendous amount of work and understanding what money is, how it's operated in history, how central banking is terrible for, the vast majority of the population. Can you understand Bitcoin's value proposition, right? And that just takes a tremendous amount of work. And if you don't have the time to do that work, it's very difficult to get there. You basically have to believe someone else telling you.
It's really interesting. And also, I've just looked it up. Since last time we spoke, Bitcoin went up more than 50%, which is a great 1 year performance, I would say. How much has changed since last year, since last time we spoke, and how do you kind of see the change that we have gone through with the institutional adoption, with the ETFs, with the strategic Bitcoin reserve, with the presidential things, with like Las Vegas happening, all those things?
I think that we are in a sort of acceleration phase of this asset. I like a lot of Seyr analogies. They make sense to me. He had a presentation talking about Bitcoin as a network, and he said Bitcoin is not a Metcalfian network like a social network. Facebook, Instagram are Metcalfian networks where the strength of the network, I think, is the square of the number of users. So, with these social networks, when you get 100 million users, that's a very powerful network and probably means that it's on pace for 1 billion people in that network. Bitcoin is not a Metcalfian network. It does not get stronger with just the pure amount of people adopting the network. It gets stronger with the amount of capital entering the network. More like a Newtonian network, like a planet or a black hole, right? If an asteroid passes by Earth, we wave to it and say, have fun on your journey through space, but it's not going to affect our gravity. It's not going to affect the tides. It's not going to affect, our life on this planet very much. But if a black hole shows up, 1,000 miles away, it's going to suck off the atmosphere of the planet and rip the Earth into it, right? A black hole is not the same as an asteroid the same size, right? It's a different thing. And I see institutions understanding that. And that's why they've been the class that has been the benefits of accumulation the last year since we last talked. Sovereign wealth funds, U.S. institutions, the ETFs, MicroStrategy as a treasury company opening the door and giving the playbook for a Bitcoin strategy. And I think they were very fringe a year ago, even though they started doing this in 2020. But I think as of today, there's 150 to 200 companies that have adopted a Bitcoin strategy. And I wouldn't be surprised if, by the end of 2026, that number is over 1,000, right? Because there's 50,000 companies that are big enough that can't grow their mature business more than, 3 to 5% a year. And they'd benefit greatly from a Bitcoin treasury strategy because they have access to capital markets that can help them raise money to invest in it and secure the life of that business for another 300 years without tremendous innovation to their core business. Like Strategy has enough money to keep their software business going for eternity, theoretically, but they don't have to reinvent the software or offer new subscriptions or raise the rate of the subscription to the software because they're backed, some ungodly amount of Bitcoin over collateralized to their business and their other obligations, right? And that can only happen when the collateral of the business and the primary asset of the business is money that is in finite supply. I think this is such a big concept that I think it's going to change, how money is invested, like how VCs determine what businesses they invest in. If a venture capital firm raises $1 billion and they can get 50% a year on Bitcoin or invest in a startup trying to do some very noble thing, but it's risky, they may not choose to do that. They can have a Bitcoin preference as the hurdle rate that may diminish a lot of the speculative venture capital investing or private equity investing that has been, so dominating our financial system for the past, 20 plus years ish. The treasuries the treasury companies I find extremely interesting because those very smart financial engineers, I think it's starting to click with them. And it's evidenced by, multiple companies daily coming out with some sort of Bitcoin strategy, not just the political news, not just the legislative and law news that's coming around the world and in the U.S. I think the smart money has figured out what it is. And
I love the point of venture capital. Sorry to jump in here, because it's like a successful startup, in my opinion, will definitely outgrow Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. But 9 out of 10 startups will go to zero. That one startup has to outperform so massively to also make up for the loss you've done on the 9 other startups. In Bitcoin, or on fiat terms, that's easy. Like one startup, that one home run will give you so much money that you're more than welcome to spend it. But when you have Bitcoin on the other hand, and you're like, okay, I could also have invested all that $500 million, let's say, into Bitcoin instead of into this each, like, I don't know, like 20 million, 30 million, 100 million into those stocks, then you're like, okay, would have still outperformed. That one startup to outperform not only Bitcoin, but then also outperform the loss that you have done from all the other startups that have failed, has to grow so substantially. It has to be such a great idea that it's really hard to outgrow Bitcoin. So I think the one thing that will change is people will only invest in proven ideas and in ideas that are so good that you have to pursue it anyways. They are so good, you really want to try it out. even if you're saying like, oh, it has a high likelihood of failing. So either people starting something that has a high likelihood of succeeding, or they start something that has a low likelihood of succeeding, but is such an amazing idea that you still want to pursue it. And I think that's where venture capital should be already. Not like the thing that we have now, like, let's give everyone some capital and let's see what which founder will make the most of it. So yeah, there will come a lot of changes. I love that point.
And I think the basis of that entire business model is basically very, very cheap or free money in most cases, right? So these VC firms can that their business model is essentially based on taking money they can get from a bank for nothing and then splattering it wherever they can to hope for one moonshot. And that ability for them to do that is only because of a debt-based monetary system. So these banks are incentivized to create money out of thin air for crazy ideas. And if they fail, no problem. But if they succeed, they usually succeed at scale in disrupting some industry, which eventually takes away, some number of human beings' real jobs in the real world. I kind of view that as some sort of, like financial terrorism in a way. You can have this bank create money for you for basically free. And what you're doing with it, like think of private equity, borrow money at 0.5%, buy a business with it. Their standard procedure is to take, the MBA approach to cut as many costs as possible, fire and lay off as many people as possible, fatten the margins, and then sell it 5 years later for more money. So that company in this existing system can borrow money for free, take away real jobs in the real world with money that cost them nothing to obtain, and then sell that business for more later. So there's no cost to, real destruction in that business for that private equity firm. And they're actually incentivized to borrow as much money as possible, to buy as many businesses as possible, to fire as many people as possible, and then sell it. So I think once we go to a hard money standard, that stops, and we're going to see a big decline in it. And I think we're actually seeing a big decline in it now. Private equity, I think, is in some trouble with rates as high as they are, and I like that, because that interest rate is basically the cost of financial terrorism. It's Max Kaiser talks about that a lot, and I never heard it framed in that way. But it does make a lot of sense. And that's why you see our manufacturing base completely dwindled and the evaporation of the middle class, not just in the US, but most places in the world. You're either extremely wealthy or you have nothing, with very little in between. And that's this constant debt-based system that people have enjoyed for quite some time.
I love that. I mean, I don't love that, but I love your perspective on that.
Yeah.
Just to make very sure.
Yeah.
It's the time flies with you all the time. I've one question that I ask each and every one of my guests, especially returning guests. What have you learned since you have last been on the podcast outside of Bitcoin?
Ooh, that's a very good question.
That's why it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, very good, very good. It's related to Bitcoin, but I've learned a lot about central bank monetary systems throughout history. That's been kind of one of my biggest deep dives since we've last spoken. I read The Creature from Jekyll Island, which is like a 600 something page book on the creation of the Federal Reserve, and started exploring, the results of central bank policy throughout history. And I'd never really questioned that until getting into Bitcoin, but learning that history, I think, made me a very ardent and bigger supporter of Bitcoin, but just made me more knowledgeable about how, the systems around the world work and operate. And I think that gave me a lot of insight around how much work is done in every country to keep that system going. From ever since you're educated as a young child, you hear about a 2% inflation rate being great, right? And then naturally you get older, and those things that you hear as a young child just become part of your normal operating system as a human being, and you don't even question. And it was definitely worth revisiting for me, because I thought I knew everything about it, and I thought that it was good. However, after revisiting it, I absolutely see how this is a recipe for disaster, and it has been a recipe for disaster every time in history. So just learning more about financial markets outside of Bitcoin, I think, has been like what I've learned the most about.
I feel like historians have an unfair advantage in understanding Bitcoin, but they don't. I know some people that really love history and they still don't get Bitcoin, but they are more open to it. Like if you meet someone that is really into history, that is like watching a lot of documentaries, like really looking in all the aspects of history in many different areas, and they're just like trying to soak everything up in many different directions. If you tell them about Bitcoin, they're way more open to that. And it's fascinating for me to see this connection between intelligent people that just study the past and really can grasp way better and in way quicker in like what is currently going on and what will go on in the future. So it's something that I lack a lot. History knowledge. It's something that I've now started doing a lot. Looking at all the historical things and learning from that now, because in school I hated history. I was like, why am I studying the past? Like, what the heck is going on? I don't want to live in the past, but it was a very stupid opinion of mine. I've reversed it now, and I'm trying to learn now more from history. So I think history is an amazing thing to learn from. So thank you so much for bringing that point, because I think a lot of people, maybe especially younger people, this podcast has not that many that many young people in the audience, like under 18. I think I have 0.1% of the audience, but also like 25 if you're that old, like you're also young. But that's really cool to have that. As you know, we have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And it's the first question where I'm quite sure that you don't know the answer of.
Okay.
even if I never gave you that question, it's something that I was not aware of. Like I was aware of it, but I couldn't really explain the difference between those. You really have to be nerding out with treasury companies, but maybe you do nerd out with treasury companies.
We'll see.
We'll see now. What preferred stock would you purchase of MicroStrategy? Strike, Strive, or Stride?
Okay. I have been nerding out. So I would purchase Strife, STRF. like where it is in the capital stack for MicroStrategy, and I like the 10% per annum dividend payment or coupon payment. I think it's a debt instrument, so I guess it would be a coupon payment.
I asked maybe for the few people that have no clue about what Strike, Strive, and Stride is, preferred stocks of MicroStrategy or
Yes.
Strategy B now.
Yeah.
I asked ChatGPT to explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, and you will tell me if this is too simple or if it's maybe wrong.
Yeah.
Imagine MicroStrategy has 3 kinds of special piggy banks. Strike pays you candy every 3 months and might turn into a golden ticket later, convert to a normal stock. Mm-hmm. Strive pays you more candy, and if they miss a turn, they will give you even more next time. Mm-hmm. Stride pays the most candy, but if they miss a turn, too bad, no extra later. And that for Strike from those 3 is the safest, and Stride is the riskiest. Yeah. Is that a fair assumption?
I think so. I do not claim to be an expert on these instruments. I've been learning a lot about them the past month. I think the candy analogy does hold. So Strife is a pure dividend payment. So you're going to get your candy, and if they miss, they owe you more candy. So if they miss, I think the dividend goes up 1%, I think, something like that, but it increases if they miss a payment. And Strike, yes, they pay you 8%, I think 8% per annum in quarterly dividends. And if the price of MicroStrategy stock goes, I think, above some Strike price, then you can convert those Strike shares into common stock in MicroStrategy at some split, I think. And then Stride, which I have the least knowledge of, I think they just announced that a few days ago. STRD is what I'm least familiar with, but I think it's just some other instrument that allows them. I view MicroStrategy as building an engine, and with each one of these products, they're adding another gear into the engine that makes the entire engine turn and produce more energy. Someone out there is probably going to disagree, and that's totally fine. But I like Saylor's analogy of, using Bitcoin as capital as an input and creating a bunch of torque with these instruments. I don't understand them all enough. I haven't invested in any of them. The one that I like most, that's most conservative, is STRF, because it pays a very high dividend. So if you're thinking about like a 60-40 portfolio where 40% is bonds, and maybe the person you're talking to is 80 years old and they don't want the exposure into a volatile asset, then STRF could be a great addition to a portfolio. Maybe you sell 10% of your bonds and put it into Strife at 10% dividends. That changes your income profile on that part of your portfolio much higher, without a lot of the risk and volatility of the underlying Bitcoin exposure. So I think about that for, potential like fixed income investors or older people in retail that they're losing their shirt holding 40% bonds at 4.5%. Maybe you don't want the risk of, Verizon or AT&T as a dividend stock that's an income producing stock ownership vehicle. This could be a very good, asset allocation to boost the income while lowering the volatility of your portfolio, and giving you more Bitcoin exposure by proxy. So I've been thinking about that a lot recently, actually. And I could see myself, as a bear market strategy, potentially, maybe if Bitcoin goes to, $1 million, maybe I sell 10% of my Bitcoin position and put it into Strife, and that pays me income so that I never have to sell any more than 10% of my Bitcoin exposure. So adding, a bucket for income based on Bitcoin as collateral, I'm kind of weighing, like, will this allow me to, hodl easier with the rest of my stack, because I can produce income, because Bitcoin in cold storage just sits there. And if you have Bitcoin, and even if you have, 1,000 Bitcoin, it's not earning you any income. So you could work, let's say someone, some garbage man bought Bitcoin in 2013, has 1,000 coins, if that's in cold storage, he still has to work his garbage man job to pay his monthly bills, because he doesn't want to sell any of his Bitcoin, or it's not earning him any money. These vehicles could provide a way to earn, a few $1,000s a quarter or a month, to kind of sustain a lifestyle or benefit from his Bitcoin stack, so that he doesn't have to sell any more in his cold storage. So I think about that, and I don't know what the right thing or right call is there. And I haven't made that decision for myself, but that's a very interesting question, and I do think about that a lot.
I love that. Amazing. I hit the right guest with that question,
Yeah,
I guess.
You did.
I was not sure. I was like,
I'm going through that right now, Robin. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you asked.
Yeah, because it's like, I think a lot of people of course, most people in Bitcoin know what MicroStrategy is, but you have to really dig deep in understanding the Strife Strike and Strife Strike, and what was the other one?
Stride.
Yeah, Stride. Yeah, they're so close together. They are like really hard to distinguish in my brain.
Yeah.
I don't have that big of a brain as Michael Seyr has, so
I don't think anybody does.
Anything does.
You want to know an interesting point about those products?
Yeah,
Michael Seyr says that he queried AI to develop those products.
Well, yeah, he mentioned it on his recent talk in Vegas also, where before he goes to any lawyer or anything, he goes ahead and asks AI in deep think mode, in deep research mode, in however it's called, with your preferred AI, and really goes there, puts all the context, all the situations in there, and then asks a bunch of questions, comes up with a perfect solution, and then just goes to the lawyers and say, like, do me this in the next 3 days.
Yeah.
and don't take longer than that, otherwise it will go to someone else. Something like that, he said.
Exactly.
So it was really fun to see that even a guy with thousands of lawyers, he goes to ChatGPT first, which is amazing to see.
Yeah. And think about those products. I imagine all of those products are now, trading with, multi-billions. So let's say between them all, let's say there's 10 billion in capital in all three of those right now. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely in the billions. Artificial intelligence invented a financial instrument that now holds $10 billion, and it's functioning. It's a productivity gain that I don't think human beings have conceptualized yet. And from conception, from query in Michael Saylor's brain to solving in AI to it being created and now here was, a matter of months, right? And most of that was really the lawyers organizing an execution plan for Seyr. So this is just a very interesting time to be alive when, an AI can come up with some instrument that 3 months later has $3 billion or whatever it is. It's a very, the turnaround from idea to execution has just been shortened by years.
It's amazing to see.
Yeah, it's amazing to see. Yeah, it's a very cool time to be alive, man.
Thank you so much, Will. It was an awesome talk. I loved our conversations a lot. I hope the people also enjoyed it. Before I let you go, where can people find you?
People can find me on X at BTC for Dummies. They can find me. They find me there. That's probably the best place to find me. I was diligent with, preaching on X and adding value on X. And then I was sitting on the beach one day and I said to myself, I trying on the internet to preach Bitcoin is difficult and may not be the best use of my time. And it was creating so much anxiety for me to constantly produce content and do all this and preach the gospel of Bitcoin. And I said to myself, I don't need to be doing this. I know that everything points in this direction and nothing stops this train. I'm going to get off of, Bitcoin Twitter and just live my life and touch grass. And a lot of the last year, especially the last 6 months, it's been mostly that for me. And I've just been so happy about it. But feel free to come in my DMs on BTC for Dummies. I'm happy to chat with anybody to talk Bitcoin. And I'm mostly focused on, orange pilling my friends in real life now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Will. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.